Welcome back to Long Delays Hobbies. I have in front of me the new Middle-earth strategy battle game journal, the Treachery of Gollum. I am excited to go and take a look. I have not really taken an in-depth look at it. I just picked it up yesterday. I did a brief run-through of it, so I thought I would just take a look at it here live for the channel and see what we have in this new journal. All right, so just taking a look at the cover real quick. Yeah, it's got a picture of Indy Circus's Gollum. We've already seen this image before. On the back, we have the new Shelob and Gollum. We have, as well as the web Frodo. We have the old, one of the old Samwises. So I don't recall if this is from the old Shelob kit or a different one. I think this is one of the old Fellowship Samwises. So here's in the bottom is just kind of some fluff text, but it's a beautiful Shelob. We're going to be seeing more of her, I think, as we go through. So let's go ahead and take a look. So we kind of have a format similar to the War of the Rohirrim. We got 9 scenarios, as was mentioned in the Warhammer community post. Pass of Cirith Ungol, Taming of Sméagol, Dead Marshes, Osgiliath, Escape through the Sewers, Sméagol's Treachery, Shelob's Lair, Bravery of Master Samwise, and The End of All Things. I don't know how many of these are like new, as in we've never seen them before. I know for sure I've seen like, of course, Shelob's Lair, The End of All Things, Taming of Sméagol. So I've definitely seen most of these before in previous supplements, but I'm interested to see what their take on these will be. And we've got some interesting hobby sections. It looks like how to paint Gollum, how to paint Shelob, Shelob's Lair that was previewed in Warhammer community, the Dead Marshes, and Osgiliath Sewers. So let's go ahead and crack into it. So we've got another picture of Gollum, and so we've got just another kind of more fluffed out introduction, telling us a little bit more in detail what we already read in the table of contents, different paint guides and so forth, the link campaign, narrative play scenarios. And now we've got, so this is the linked campaign, which is really cool. So if you want to play all of these in like a campaign, you can just play them all one after another rather than in standalone. That's kind of interesting. The two sides get different buffs based off of what happens, so it's kind of cool. So the first one is the Path of Cirith Ungol. So this is wandering, yeah, this is just random orcs wandering through the tunnels, or an orc captain, some orc warriors on one side, and then Shelob. So I like how they put good in quotation marks here. I don't know if I've seen this scenario before. Yeah, they have Shelob's Lair. It looks like they're making use of this new Shelob's Lair that they've come up with. Navigating the lair. Only the tile that the good player's model start in is revealed. It's kind of like a dungeon crawler where you only see what you're in. So it's very interesting. If one of their models moves through an exit into an unrevealed tile, the activation is immediately paused and the evil player reveals the tile. So that's kind of cool. A Nameless Terror is the start of the evil player's activation phase. If Shelob is in a tile that has not been revealed, then the good player must look away. So there's a lot of like interactions between the players and these tiles in in Shelob's Lair. So the evil player will then activate Shelob. It seems like if like the orcs are in an area where Shelob is, let's see, the evil player will then activate Shelob as normal, placing, oh, I see. You can move Shelob away, essentially. So you can move her like from one tile into another tile. So if you're the good player and Shelob is here, and you don't want the good player to know that, then you can move Shelob here or there or wherever. So that's kind of interesting. Now there's only like 9 tiles, keep in mind. So you can place 6 web markers on the board. So you're covering you're covering 2/3 of the board, but the good players are starting in one of those. So you're covering really effectively over 2/3 of the board. These are 40 millimeter base, but they block an entire pathway. Web markers cannot be moved through by good models and have a defensive, so you have to actually attack them. They can be targeted by shooting attacks, and so you can get into combat with them. That's interesting. You will automatically win a combat, but you have to kind of waste time fighting them. But if a model has been charged by model that has charged a web marker is charged by Shelob, then they're engaged with combat and will not fight the web marker. I'm guessing you'll probably count as trapped if you're both in combat with the web marker and with Shelob. So that's all. Shelob can like trap you. Secret tunnels. If at the beginning of her activation Shelob is in a tile that contains no enemy models, and no enemy models can draw a line of sight to her, then the evil player can remove her from the battlefield so she can teleport and place her in base contact with a web marker. Wow. That's kind of crazy. Oh, and they give you a little note here. You can play this with a good warband also. Like if you wanted to play out a scenario where, you know, I don't know, Lothorian elves were wandering over there to do a scouting mission, or maybe like Minas Tirith warriors were going to do like a scouting mission over, or maybe rangers were going to scout like the, you know, the western side of Mordor. You could kind of play that scenario out. The Taming of Sméagol. What's interesting is that this scenario actually doesn't have Gollum in it at all, even though this is called the Treachery of Gollum. So the Taming of Sméagol. This is when they first encounter Sméagol, when Frodo and Samwise do, in Weald. So it's just Frodo, Sam, and Sméagol. Sleeping Hobbits are our special rules. It's just Frodo and Sam start on the board, and it's on a 2x2, and Sméagol is not on the board. Oh, it says, oh, he is on the board. He's just anywhere. That's why he's not. There's no marker here, so he can be anywhere on the eastern board edge. And so the good player wins. You want to subdue Gollum. The Gollum player wants to kill Frodo and reclaim the ring, of course. So the Hobbit players start prone, and because they're asleep. This is interesting. So you want to, every time Gollum moves, you roll a d6. And if the number rolled is higher than the distance between him and the hobbits, or a 6 is rolled, then he has disturbed them. You're kind of playing a game of chance. So if you roll one, like, you know, if you're moving slowly, you have a better chance of the hobbits, you know, not waking up. But you're also giving them more chances to roll a 6. You want to maybe move 2 or 3 inches so that they, you know, there's lower chance of them waking up. So it's kind of an interesting mechanic. Subduing Gollum. If Gollum suffers his last wound, then he is subdued. So you're trying to take him out. It's kind of tough because Gollum has a better profile than Sam or Frodo, although both of them together, you know, they should be able to take him out. Each time Gollum loses a combat against Frodo, he must take a courage test. That kind of tips the balance more into Frodo and Sam's favor, because you're also adding the whole courage test into the equation. I do feel like they are putting a lot more thought into these narrative scenarios. The ones in this book and the ones in the War of the Rohirrim book, they seem like they've put more thought into them. So the Dead Marshes. So this is the part where they're wandering through the swamp and Frodo falls in. Gollum has to rescue them. We've got a number of specters. So let's see what we have. Frodo with Sting, Samwise with a cloak, and Sméagol. And we also have a ring wraith with 1 attack and 7 will on Fellbeast and 6 specters. So that could potentially be problematic if that ring wraith manages to find its way into combat with you. It's probably going to be game over, but let's see what the special rules are. So you're trying to, as the good player, cross the Dead Marshes without being noticed. So you're just trying to escape, go around these like specters and the ring wraith. And as the evil player, of course, I think this is probably going to be a recurring theme. You're just trying to kill Frodo and take the ring back. That's it. Special rules. Hunt the ring bearer as the all evil models start the game as sentries. Oh, so they're doing the sentry rule. So if you're not familiar with the sentry rule, there's like a table in the main rule book. It's under like the advanced rules, kind of where like the swim tests and the like the light object rules are. And there's like a table. Depending on what you roll in that table, you pretend like you don't see the other model, but you roll a dice to see whether or not you do see the other model. I think it's on like a 4+. You see the other model and you sound the alarm. I mean, it's a little bit more granular than that because there's different degrees of whether or not you see the other model. However, so they start the sentries. If a model would normally spot a good model, they will not raise the alarm. Instead, only that model will have been alerted to their presence. Okay, so they don't sound the alarm. They don't tell everyone. Only they will be alerted to their presence and may act normally. The others will remain as sentries. That kind of makes sense. If, you know, the one specter saw them and the ring wraith came after them, this scenario would probably end very quickly. or potentially, or it would be, at least it would be a lot more difficult. Don't follow the lights. So, you know, this rule is for the, you know, Frodo to not stop and stare at the specters. If a good model is moved into any of the areas of the marshland, as a result of the specters, a fell light is within them rule. Okay, so the specters have to, first of all, they have to like be activated, and then they can start triggering this fell light is in them. They must roll a d6. On a 1 or 2, they fall into the marsh, which is pretty brutal, and they go prone. So that's even worse. They cannot act in any way. Wow. Can they not stand up, or can they not try to like get out? Like, that's kind of crazy. I guess they have to be rescued. Friendly model can rescue a model that has succumbed by ending their move in base contact with them. Okay, so the only way to get them out is for somebody else to go in base contact with them. That's thematic, but like, you know, in the movie, you don't have a specter coming after you. Whereas in this scenario, you have to deal with like at least one specter, possibly multiple specters fighting that you're gonna be casting fell light within you. So it's gonna be quite difficult. It's a like fun thematic rule, but I don't know how balanced it is. Call the ring. If Frodo puts on the ring, then the ring wraith will no longer be a sentry. Okay, yeah, well, that makes sense. Yeah, it's kind of tough because the ring wraith is going to, like, obviously the evil player is going to have the ring wraith and is going to try to it's going to come after you, right? Even though they're sentries, you can still kind of manipulate that to try to get around that. Yeah, this is probably a tough scenario. So, I mean, it's probably doable, but it's just like, yeah, you have to be very careful. Okay, we're going straight to Osgiliath. So this is that part in the movie where he's like, they're like, Frodo and Sam are kind of hunkering down. They've just escaped from Faramir, or been let go by Faramir. And there's like the ring wraith coming right on top of them. So we've got a fair amount of like Minas Tirith heroes. Faramir, Madril, Damrod, Frodo, Samwise, Sméagol, 13 warriors, 12 rangers, and just 6 Osgiliath veterans for fun. A pretty large force. And we got some orc captains on the evil side, a ring wraith, and one with a banner. So this is essentially like a battle, at least in terms of participants. Let's see what the scenarios are. But, you know, in the film, if we're going like Gollum and Frodo centric, then their whole objective was just to escape. Objective: Frodo must escape Osgiliath, or the ring might be captured. The orcs do not know the presence of the ring bearer, and they want to capture the city. Okay, so yeah, so the game lasts until Frodo is no longer on the board. So you're trying to get Frodo off. You want to use, you know, Faramir and the Minas Tirith warriors to kind of fight off the orcs and the ring wraith. The evil player wins if they control more of the ruined buildings than the good side at the end of the game. It's interesting that there are kind of different win scenarios, because if you're good, you want to get Frodo off the board. If you're evil, you don't really care that much about Frodo. You're trying to take control of these ruined buildings. It looks like they have, at least in this diagram there are 3 ruined buildings. You could probably do more if you wanted to. I would probably do on a 4x2. I might do 5, but I like a lot of terrain, so that's how I would play it. So let's read these specials. Captured buildings. A building is considered to be controlled by a player if they have more models wholly within the building. That's pretty simple. Does that happen during the end phase or the movement phase? I don't know how much that matters, but yeah, control the building can swap multiple times over the course of the battle. It's probably not that important when it happens. I mean, you could control it like in your move phase, and then your opponent could take control of it in their move phase, and then in the fight phase, like the same thing could happen. It probably, like I said, it doesn't really matter that much, because all that really matters is the objective part. Like if at any point the evil player controls more ruined buildings than good, then they win. Okay, the Nazgul ring wraith will automatically arrive at the end of their 3rd activation phase. Okay, well, that's good. They don't start on the board. Once per game, during the priority phase, the Nazgul can let out a terrifying shriek, which will worsen all good players' model courage values by 3. You know, this might be a little bit controversial, but I think that they should have more stuff like this, because in the films and in the books, the ring wraiths are really more terrifying than they are magical based. I know that like kind of runs counter to how they've always been made into the game. In the game, they've always been made into like magicians, but I think that they should be more of like courage debuffers. Now, I'm not suggesting that they add this to how they're already built, but anyway, that's a bit of a sidetrack. Additionally, with Frodo being under the influence of the ring, he cannot put it on. So wow, if he puts it on, he's just done. Each time a warrior is removed as a casualty, roll a d6. On a 1 to 3, they take no further part. On a 4+, they may re-enter the board. That's a little bit annoying because you have to track. You don't continuously roll for them. You have to say like, okay, this guy rolled his 4 up already and he failed, so he goes away. It does allow you to kind of be a little bit more liberal with like sending guys in, because like who cares, on a 4 up they come back. There's like theoretically a guy could die like 3 times, as long as you roll a 4 up from, they're going to come back. So like you really don't care about your warriors, especially if you're, well, evil or good, right? You don't really care. If you're the good side, all you care about is getting Frodo off the board. So just, yeah, throw your dudes into the fray. Poor Sméagol. Sméagol's under the control of the good player, but the good models may not benefit from any heroic actions. Okay, sure. Like, I don't know how many heroic actions you're going to declare as Sméagol. Maybe like a heroic combat or heroic move, I guess. But if you're thinking about doing that, then, you know, don't. Escape through the sewers. I don't recall this being too heavily emphasized in the film, but yeah, they do escape through a sewer when they get out of Minas Tirith. But I definitely don't remember there being orcs in that sewer, but apparently there were. so this is that scenario, okay? So we got Frodo with Sting and Samwise and Sméagol. There's a Mordor orc captain on 12 Mordor orc warriors. So it's just Frodo and Sam and Sméagol versus like one orc warband, essentially. Kind of sounds like a mismatch to me. Because I don't think, see, they're regular Mordor, yeah, they're not Morannons, so I think between the 3 of them, they probably shouldn't have too much of an issue taking down that warband, except for the captain. The captain might cause them problems. You probably still don't want to be like going toe-to-toe with like 13 dudes, because even though they are heroes, they're not the strongest heroes, so you probably want to still just try to escape. So the game lasts until there are no good models left on the board. So you just want to go through like the sewers. It's kind of like a little version number 2. The evil player is just trying to kill Frodo. Like I said, I knew that was going to be a recurring theme in this book. Special rules. Too great a risk. Frodo can't put on the ring. That's also probably going to become a recurring theme. Like the ring in match play is one of Frodo's best rules. It would be quite strong in this narrative play, because then he could just put on the ring and just run right through, and you know that would be one of your 3 dudes just off the table. Patrolling orcs. At each step of the move phase, before the heroic action step, roll a d6 for each marker still on the board. Okay, I didn't see anything about markers, so let's see. Let's go back to starting positions. The evil player does not deploy their models. Oh, I see. So these guys don't start on the board. They're just deployed as markers. They deploy 6 25mm markers, and they cannot be in line of sight of Frodo, Sam, or Sméagol, and they cannot be within 6 inches of each other. So, okay, so that does make things a little bit easier. So you're going to deploy these markers like, you know, wherever you want to if you're the evil player, but at least that kind of guarantees you're going to get, you know, like here. Before you encounter anything. Okay, so when a marker is revealed, how does a marker get revealed? Oh, okay, when they draw line of sight to a marker. When a marker is revealed, evil player rolls a d6. So it's kind of random which one you encounter. You won't know. You will eventually fight all of them, but you know, you might encounter like the archers first, which is like, who cares? 3 Mordor orc, but at least you won't have to worry about like fighting like a shield wall. Well, I'm actually reading the table. It looks like 1 shield and 1 with 1 spear. So it looks like one of the markers is actually a dude with a spear and a dude with a 2-hand. They thought about this. They actually will come with a spear support in them. They didn't put like 2 spears and then 2, you know, regular guys or whatever. So you will have like a spear support, but only 1. I don't know if that's better or worse, quite frankly. So they act as sentries. So here's our sentry rule again. So you can get even closer to them without them like fighting you. They're not immediately going to just run at you. Sewer waters. So sewer waters are treated as shallow water. Markers may move. Oh, so your markers can move. That's interesting. They're near slowed. Additionally, any model that begins its activation within the water must roll a d6. On a roll of 1, their activation immediately ends. And they have a designer's note that says they recommend having a lot of columns and places to hide so that you can avoid the sentries and so forth. So yeah, otherwise you'll get bogged down because these I'm guessing, since this is only a 2x2, I'm guessing these pathways are going to be very narrow, so you don't want to just get bogged down just fighting orcs all day. Like I said, it's possible with these 3 to like fight your way through 12 different orcs. It's also conceivable that you could lose. Sméagol's Treachery. So this is like a card game. This is not even like a scenario, right? So this is a little bit interesting. Let's just read through the setup. You will need a pack of ordinary playing cards. Separate the hearts out. So that would be 13 cards. And shuffle the remaining cards Shuffle them and lay them out face down in a single line. This is the path. And then Sam's here, Frodo's here, Sméagol's here. So both Sam and Sméagol are trying to convince Frodo to believe them to decide who goes first. Players roll off, re-rolling any ties. This is probably I'm guessing this is the only time dice will even be used. On a player's turn, they may do one of three things. Move, discard hand, draw a new hand. When a player attempts to move their character, they will play a card from the hand faced up. The opposing player secretly looks at the next card in the path. These put down randomly? It says they're hearts, but yeah, okay, yeah, they're shuffled. You don't know the order. So the opposing player secretly looks at the next card in the path. For moving character, played card is equal to or higher value. Okay. Move the character onto it. Okay, so you don't move Frodo. You move either Sam or Sméagol. Yes, important to be completely honest. Okay, so no lying. Okay, so both players are drawing from the same deck, which has 3 suites in it. So so you both have 5 cards. Okay, so let's say I have a 2. You know, let's say I'm playing as Samwise. So you play a card, I don't know, 2. Is it equal to or higher than the face card? And you flip the card face down. Oh, okay, so do you play your card first? Yeah, you play your card first, and then you have to look. Then the face down card, so then okay. But you can't, it's kind of interesting. Yeah, you do have to be honest, because you could just, I guess, lie. So, let's say this card is like, I don't know, a 10 or something, and you drew a 9. Well, obviously that is higher, so you would flip this card, and then Samwise would move on to it. But if you drew a jack, you wouldn't flip this card because a jack is higher than a 10. You would just have to discard that. Now, so when does your turn end? I guess you keep drawing until you can no longer play anymore. Oh, yeah. You keep drawing until you're either out of cards. You keep playing your cards until you're out of cards or until you want to discard. So it's a very interesting mechanic. Whoever reaches Frodo first is the winner. So we're back in Shelob's lair again. So we've already went over the rules for navigating the lair, the nameless terror, and the webs. This scenario has a ton of rules because in addition to those 3 rules, which took up like 3/4 of a page, we also have, you know, another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rules. So if you combine all those together, we're looking, the special rules are going to be like 2 columns of an entire page. Well, let's just look at the setup. So we got just Frodo and Shelob. And then Sméagol, this is where Sméagol is actually like full on turned eagle. So the game lasts until Frodo is no longer on the board. So either Frodo is going to escape, or Shelob is going to eat him. If Sméagol is slain, the best result the evil player can achieve is a draw. So Frodo can't put on the ring, as is usual at this point in the campaign. So Gollum cannot charge Frodo, so that's good. Where is he deployed? The evil player then deploys Sméagol, touching any of the exit. Okay, he's like deployed where he's like taunting Frodo, just like in the movie. Frodo also can't charge Sméagol. I don't know how he would be killed then, if he can't be charged. At the beginning of each activation, Frodo must take an intelligence test. If he cannot draw line of sight to Shelob, evil player may move. Oh, okay. So if he fails his intelligence test, then the evil player can move him. If Sméagol is in an unrevealed tile, then the good player must look away when the evil player moves Frodo. Shelob may not activate at the start of the game. Okay, so you can't secretly move Shelob like and just ambush Frodo. If you move Frodo through a web marker, Shelob becomes aware and starts to activate through that nameless terror rule. Shelob's hunger. Shelob treats Sméagol as an enemy model. Oh, okay, that's how Sméagol will be killed. Shelob could eat him. Elven gifts. Frodo carries the light of Eärendil, and so oh, okay, so that helps Frodo somewhat. He causes terror. That's also somewhat helpful. And he gains +1 to wound. Any roll of 4 up to wound will automatically destroy the web. Oh, and Shelob can't use will points. So, like, Shelob's been slightly nerfed. The Bravery of Master Samwise. So we have like a more open scenario. So it's only on a 1x1, so that's, you know, very small. You know, we're using now our webbed Frodo. This is the one scenario where we use webbed Frodo. And we have Samwise and Shelob and good old webbed Frodo in the middle. So the edges of the layer should be rocky walls with 80mm exits because she's now on an 80mm base. And a single 25mm marker representing an webbed Frodo. So you don't even actually have to use webbed Frodo if you don't want to. You could just use a marker. Anyway, the objectives are for the good player to either kill Shelob or just fight her back. And of course, if you're evil, you want to just kill Samwise. So Sam automatically passes courage tests, so you don't have to worry about terror. If there is a draw, whenever the two models are dueling, then Sam will win. So that's actually really good. You roll a 6. If you're Sam, you roll a 6 and you win. That's like really solid. Because I think Shelob only has like 2 attacks. So Sam has 2 attacks also. So, I mean, although Shelob is going to be charging a lot, so she'll get that 3rd attack in. But just to be able to roll a 6 and win is like really, really good. Light of Earendil. Sam has Terror, as we saw in the last scenario, because he's holding the Light of Earendil. Shattered Hunter. Shelob may not spend will points to pass courage test. Oh, and she can't use brutal power attacks. Yeah, because that would be kind of OP. When Shelob fails a courage test for her survival instinct, she is not removed from the board. When she activates, she must move d6 inches away. If this move would see Shelob touch any of her exits, and she slinks off into the gloom. So you want to kind of pin her back like over here if you possibly can, and then make her take a survival instinct test. Although just doing a wound against her is probably not that easy. Well, he has Sting, right? So, okay, so you're strength 3. Oh, okay. So Sam carries Sting in the scenarios. Strikes from Sting and bonus to +1 to wounds. So she is actually defense 7. Samwise would, with strength 3, would be wounding her on 6s normally. But with the +1 to wound, that would take it down to a 5. That's quite good, actually, wounding her on 5. So this scenario is pretty strong actually for the good side. As long as you don't roll terribly, as long as you win a couple dual rolls as Samwise, then you're okay. Now, the negative is if you do roll badly, the Shelob can just end you very quickly. Last scenario, the end of all things. This is a scenario that we have definitely seen before. I think it was in the Quest of the Ring Bearer. But it's an interesting one because you kind of have a sideboard. So you have one 4x4 and you have a 2x2. There's so much information here that they had to split it across 2 pages. So we have on the good side, Frodo, Aragorn and Elisar, Gandalf the White, Legolas, Gimli, Meriadoc, Pippin, Éomer, 25 Minas Tirith warriors, and 25 Rohan warriors on foot. And on the evil side, you got your Mordor Troll Chieftain, Mouth of Sauron, Sméagol, Morannon Orc Captains, 50 Morannon Orcs, and two Morannon Orcs with Banner. So the Battle of the Black Gate is happening here. You can even see the gate set up here, and this is Mount Doom. The objectives are that Frodo is going to destroy the ring. The game lasts until either Frodo has destroyed the ring or is taken over by it or killed. So if you're evil, you win if the opposite happens. In addition, like if you're evil, you also are trying to kill all the heroes at the Black Gate. There's a lot of heroes at the Black Gate. Aragorn, Gandalf, Legolas, Gimli, and Merry and Pippin. So you've got a lot of heroes to chew through. Frodo still can't put on the ring. So we've got an interesting little mini game we have going on here. Before the priority phase, you pick one of these and it goes off on a corresponding dice roll. You have to pick first. So exhaustion, it goes off on a 3+. If it goes off, Frodo has to take a courage test for each inch he wishes to move. Wow, that's crazy. But I mean, right away, if he fails any of these courage tests, he collapses immediately. Now, Sam may carry Frodo. Okay, so that makes it, a little less good because you can still carry him. But of course, Sméagol's there, so Sméagol can just engage Sam. Corruption goes off in a 4+. Frodo begins the game with 6 resistant points. When his power is used, the evil player rolls a d6 and compares the number of resistant points. Okay, so this is reflecting his remaining willpower left. If the result is equal to or remaining the Frodo's current resist points, then Frodo immediately loses a resist point. If Frodo's resistant points are reduced to 0, then the game ends. So this is like one way you can end the game, is to try to chip away at his resistance. Lure of the Ring. The ring provokes Sméagol to attack, and he is placed in base contact with the ring bearer. They will fight as normal during the fight phase, so he just immediately is in base contact. If Sméagol is ever slain, this power can no longer be used. So yeah, let's go back and look at the starting position. So Frodo and Sam are in the southwest corner of the Crack of Doom. The evil player deploys all their models except Sméagol. So Sméagol just kind of pops in and out. That's actually kind of okay if you're the good player, because Sméagol can only ever come in if you pick this power, and then you have to roll a 5 up. So that makes this a lot easier. Because you're probably rarely going to have to worry about Sméagol coming in. Let's see, who does he fight? Yeah, he fights Frodo. So he would be in the priority phase, but you can then use like Sam to make sure that you always are going to be outnumbering him. This really isn't. I would probably not use this. I don't think, if I were the evil player. I'd probably go for this exhaustion one because that's going to make it very difficult for him to actually get to the Crack of Doom. So how do you destroy the ring? To destroy the ring, Frodo must be in base contact with the edge of the precipice. He will enter in a battle of wills. Both players roll a d6. If the good player wins this roll 3 times in a row, then it's destroyed. If the evil player wins it 3 times in a row, the ring corrupts Frodo. Frodo may use might, so you want to save your might if you're the good player. It doesn't say like you're doing this 3 times over 3 different turns. It doesn't really say how the sequence ends. So like if I'm the good player and I win, and let's say the evil player then wins, is the sequence then over? Or do you then roll to see if the evil player wins 3 times in a row? Gandalf does not have the staff, okay. Yep, because it's in the movie, it's already been broken. Teeming horns. Each time a mortal orc is slain, evil player may move any models kept aside, so it's just automatic. You don't even roll dice, they just come back. Good players may not willingly move more than 12 inches away from the center of the Black Gate board. Greatest of the trolls, Mordor Troll Chieftain has the Fearless rule. And in addition, so yeah, this is in the Quest of the Ringbearer scenario as well. So they've taken a lot of this from the Quest of the Ringbearer scenario. So yeah, the only real question I have is about this destroying the ring special rule. I'm not, because if we're assuming that like once you get to the precipice, you just roll until one of the other players gets 3 in a row, once Frodo gets to the precipice, then the game is over. Like one of the 2 players will at one point roll better. I think, yeah, that's how I would, that's seems like what they're wanting you to do. You get there and then you just roll until one of the 2 players rolls 3 in a row. If you've saved your might as Frodo, then you have an advantage, but you know, you could always just roll badly. It's not a huge advantage because Frodo has, I think, what, 2 might? Not that many. I wish they would give you a special rule to use Samwise's might for this, but they don't. And that's all the scenarios. So these scenarios are 24 pages of the book. So we've got a nice little section on how to paint Gollum. I won't go through it step by step. I am just gonna try to take a quick look and see what their method is. It looks like so what they do is they give you the steps here. They're using Kading Flesh Tone and Rakarth Flesh and Gracier in a mix. This is actually fairly advanced for Games Workshop. You know, usually they'll tell you use this one paint and then use this other paint to wash it and then use, you know, another paint to highlight it. That's not what they're doing here. They're saying use a mix of these 3 and then use a mix of these 2. This is kind of an advanced guide. But as you can see, it does look pretty good in the final step. And they do have some individual paints. I have painted Gollum previously for this channel and a different Gollum model than this, but I do like the skin. Because one of the hardest things about painting Gollum is painting his skin, because there isn't a paint in the Games Workshop line, at least, that really correlates to his skin. So that's why they've used this mix, because his skin is like this weird color that's really hard to get right. How to paint Shelob. This is very handy because Shelob is a very complex model to paint. You had all these little bits and bobs all over her. There's not like a ton of different colors, just like black, red, a little bit of orange here. But getting the dots right, you know, if you don't get those right, then it won't really look like Shelob, right? So it'll just look like your run-of-the-mill spider, which is not necessarily what you want. For this model, you can just use like normal colors for the most part. You know, out of the box colors is what I mean. So you can just use colors that come from paint pots, and you don't have to do a lot of mixing. And they've kind of said that. Use corn red for the reds, towelite ochre for the little blotches on her skin, some shading, Agrexar shade it looks like. Oh, that's for the base. By the way, it's not clear here if you don't have this model. This is a textured base, as in it's included in the miniature. This isn't like scenery that Games Workshop has done. This is actually, these rocks at least are part of the miniature. So I know some people, myself included, don't necessarily like that. I prefer to make my own basing terrain. And finally, Web Frodo. For whatever reason, we have a paint guide for the Web Frodo. It seems like it'd be fairly easy to paint, but just in case you were curious, it's just mostly Carrick Stone and Deepkin Flesh with a little bit of highlighting over that. Now we have some interesting hobby guides on how to make the Lair, which I thought is really cool. It's funny because if you just look at this at this point, it just looks like you don't use any Games Workshop parts in this at all. It just looks like foam. But in the you will need section, they give you some stuff like the Ruins of Dol Guldur kit, which you don't really need. You could just get bones from anywhere. And they're not really a good kit to get bones from anyway, honestly. You could get, if you're just looking for plastic bones, you could get them from like an old Warhammer Fantasy kit They have better bones in there, much cheaper than the Ruins of Dol Guldur, which is, I think, $75 or $80 US right now. So they have pretty detailed steps on how to build this. It's not really difficult. They've given you the steps really nicely here. The issue really is really storage. I think for most people, a lot of people don't necessarily have the storage space for something like this because you want to make 9 tiles like this. But it looks really cool, and I'm not opposed to them including stuff like this. Webbed orcs can be made by removing protruding limbs and then tightly wrapping the orc in a dryer sheet. That's a neat trick. How do they make the webs? It looks like it says they use a dryer sheet. How to make webs? Okay. I am a little bit interested in this. So this is to make the web markers. 40mm round base, modeling sand, metal wire, some kind of metal wire. You can get these like in a lot of places. Craft stores, a lot of times like DIY stores like Home Depot or Lowe's will have them here in the US. They put down some, you know, just modeling sand or undercoated the base. So what they've done with the dryer sheet is put it into a little ball and then stretch it back out. And then they brush glue onto it and then put it over this little circular metal wire. Squeeze out excess PVA glue and then drape the first sheet over the ring. I would have to try this out. I think it probably comes apart. If you start to pull at it a little bit, it probably looks like a spider's web. So it does look really great. But as I said before, like the storage for something like this, like I'm sure they have enough room for something like this in like Games Workshop headquarters. Your typical hobbyist is probably not going to have room to store this unless you just have a ton of room. Let's take a look. These pictures are new. I don't think there's anything particularly interesting in this. We've got like a spider and 2 orc warriors, and then we've got the really old orc captain and 2 other orcs that are with him. It's a nice shot here. I do like this promotional picture they have of just a bunch of orc warriors running around trying to escape Shelob. The Dead Marshes. This is something that might be a little easier to store because you can kind of create these little marshes and stack them up and put them away. You would need like a piece of square that you just cut into circles. It looks like cardboard, I suppose is what that looks like. And this is drywall filler. This is very expensive. They're saying use Dead Marsh Specters, Mordor Orcs. I mean, Mordor Orcs and Warriors of the Last Alliance are pretty cheap. Dead Marsh Specters are not cheap. I would not use those in one of these. You know, just cover it with filler and then put your models in the bottom, a few rocks or whatever, put a few pieces of tufts and so forth. Well, that's an interesting method. For the tufts, they use some old paintbrushes. That's an interesting use of old paintbrush bristles. I've thrown out so many paintbrushes. Never thought to save the bristles to use as grass tufts. So that might be something I do going forward. And then pour the resin into like the hollowed out pieces of the card. This would only really work in like a swamp, these bristles. I mean, they might not look too normal if you try to put them on most bases. I might put them on like Dead Marsh Spectre base, but otherwise I probably wouldn't put them on most of my miniature bases. It does look pretty good. Osgiliath sewers. This is probably a little bit more simple. It looks like you just use MDF, so you just kind of use the Gondor wall kits, kind of make them however you want to look like, and then you can use the MDF as your walkway, and then just put some dirt in the corners to kind of give it a little bit of flavor. This does look really nice though, and it probably stores pretty easily too. Of course, once you start pouring resin in something, then it no longer becomes easy to store. I will say that. What's interesting is it looks like in the final example, I don't see any resin here, but it is an overhead shot, so it might be difficult to see. Yeah, in this angle, I do see the resin. It wasn't clear in that previous. Much like Shelob's Lair, like, you know, it looks great, but it's going to require like a lot of work. So if this is the kind of thing you're into, this is a really good guideline for doing this type of stuff, but it's also going to take like a lot of storage, which is the main problem for, I think, most people. It's good to have a guideline for something like this. And for me, even though I will probably not ever do something like this, just because of the lack of space that I have and time, I will go through this and see if there's something, tips that I have that I can use just for my basing on my regular guys. You know, maybe I'll do some basing on some of my guys with these like planks or so forth. So, and this is a good guide for that. So it's important when you're reading hobby guides like this to keep in mind that the tips that they give don't just apply if you're specifically making sewers. They apply if you want to make like a sewer themed base. And that's it. That's the whole book. My thoughts on this are, I did quite enjoy like the hobby section. I think it probably had better hobby section than the last journal, the War of the Rohirrim journal. The scenarios, for me, I thought were also better than the War of the Rohirrim journal, although a lot of those scenarios were not new necessarily. I know of at least 2 or 3 of those that were taken from, not directly taken, but conceptually they were taken from previous books like Quest of the Ring Bearer and kind of modified to kind of just be updated with the new rules, which is totally fine. I don't mind that. You know, if you've already got a good scenario, there's no reason to mess around with it too much. But at the same time, I would have kind of liked to see some newer scenarios. You know, I don't know which of these scenarios are actually like brand new. Again, definitely feel free to correct me in the comments, but I don't know how many of these are totally new. Now, I get that the setting is not like, it's not like there's new content coming out for the setting, with the exception of like, obviously War of the Rohirrim was new. For this setting specifically, for the, you know, the Lord of the Rings era, there's not really new content that's coming out. So there's really only so many things they can create scenarios for. There's a very limited amount. What they can do is make new scenarios for existing content, if that makes sense. So they can take, I don't know, the End of All Things, like they don't necessarily have to use the exact same rules for that scenario if they wanted to. They could have just rewritten that scenario from scratch rather than using the same existing scenario and just barely modifying it. You know, that's just an example that comes to my mind. The other thing that I know some people have been complaining about is the lack of any kind of match play content. I don't mind it too much because I don't really engage in too much of match play. The lack of match play content is not really a deal breaker for me. You know, I know not everybody falls into that camp. I wouldn't really mind if we got separate journals for matched play. I don't know how feasible that is from a cost perspective from them. I personally would like to see a model wherein we got these journals that are narrative being released as is, just like this, and then separately content for more competitive focused or competitive minded players in either a different book or online only in PDFs. Because like the state of the game for me is perfectly fine. But if you're a person who, you know, wants to play like super hardcore competitive lists week after week, and only hardcore competitive lists week after week, hardcore competitive lists haven't really changed since last summer. You're going to be playing with and against the same list, more or less, with maybe very, very slight changes since June or July, probably, because there haven't been any changes of any kind since the Armies of the Lord of the Rings book came out. There was a very, very minor FAQ in August, but that did nothing really to make any changes or shift to the way competitive players play. Again, I wouldn't really mind something like that. I want to keep these books the way they are because I really like the release format, because for those of you who maybe don't remember, they used to combine these campaign books along with match play content. So you would get a book like this that had a lot of these narrative scenarios. It included little or no hobby content, but then would also include like a bunch of lists that were for match play. And those books costed about twice as much as this did. Now, I know a lot of people will say like, I don't care how much it costs. Not to be selfish, but I kind of do care how much it costs. This book costed, for me, after a discount, about $25 US. Whereas those old supplements, granted, they were twice as big, but they also costed over twice as much. So we're talking about, you know, almost $60 US. So, and like I said, I understand that that's not a deal breaker for some people. They don't care how much it costs. They'll pay $60, $70, $80 for a supplement without complaining. But I would prefer if I could only pay for the content that I want, which is the narrative focused content. But again, that's just a preference on my end. I think I've kind of talked about that to the extent that I need to. There's no reason to keep going into that. But if you purchase this book and you have any thoughts about that, about the scenarios that are in the book, about the hobby content, about anything else that's in the book, or anything else that's not in the book that you wish was in the book, then feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit that like button, and don't forget to have a great day. Thank you once again for watching. Take care.